captured a ghost with this camera.
Horror games have always fascinated me. I've been a big fan for as long as I can remember, and there's just something really interesting about Asian horror. It breaks all the rules and anything can happen. There's really no limit on what's allowed or absolutely how bonkers the storyline can go, and that's part of the charm, sometimes for mixed results. When it comes to Asian horror though, there's one thing that comes to mind. Spooky ghosts! It's no mystery that a common staple of the genre is ghosts, and with good reason. There's just so many Asian cultures rich with superstitions about spirits, it's only natural to get a plethora of content revolving around the living impaired. For that reason, it's probably best you don't watch this video at night if you're of the belief that spirits can haunt the living. Fatal Frame had humble beginnings from Tecmo, famous for their obsession with booby physics and now making games where you mash the X button over and over again. Originally intended as the, hey, we can do Resident Evil 2 response to Capcom's money printing machine,
my big brother, he was so sweet and kind.
Fatal Frame began as Zero in Japan, or Project Zero everywhere else outside the United States, and became a cult classic very quickly. This likely isn't your first time hearing about the Japanese schoolgirl and haunted house simulator series, and it won't be the last. The game was released back in 2001 on the PlayStation 2, and then later on the original Xbox. For the sake of this video, we're going to be playing the PS2 version on my PS3. Which started as a simple response as Silent Hill and Resident Evil took off and became a franchise of its own, spanning over 5 games, a spin-off, a movie, and a handful of supplemental content. The original game even earned the reputation of being so scary that many didn't even finish it, though I don't know how much there is truth to that, and how much of it is just the developers blowing smoke.
I remember the incident from which I learned of its unique power to capture ghosts.
By today's standards, it might not seem like much when you compare it to the absolute gore factories that the industry has become famous for. I mean, you look at a game like Doom 2016 where enemies literally just explode into a mountain of guts, and you may be thinking Fatal Frame is tame by such standards. And if you're all about blood and guts, you may have to look elsewhere to get your fill, because a Saw movie, Fatal Frame is not.
You remember her name, Detective? Or did you squeeze her for information and throw her away?
That being said, though, the game still managed to deliver an interesting story and a quality narrative with a unique playstyle, if not a bit of a janky one. Come on, die, you This game I wouldn't even begin to say has aged flawlessly, but it's far from unplayable. Just very inaccessible. If you wanted to play this today, your only real options are to track down the original hardware, or see if there's still a way to buy the digital version off the PS3 storefront, that is assuming it's still online by the time this video goes up. While Fatal Frame 4 and 5 have been preserved far better, and Fatal Frame 2 got a remake on the Wii, the first game is surprisingly difficult to get without forming the Straw Hats. It's actually quite a remarkable piece of gaming history, and if you haven't heard of it before this video, then consider this an introduction to the franchise. Before we go any further though, we have to address the elephant in the middle of the room. The tagline of the game insisting that it's based on a true story has been debated for years, and ultimately from everything I've read, it's dubious at best. Evidently, the story was based upon a handful of Japanese folklore, but not a reimagining or retelling of any specific person's experience. I guess there doesn't actually exist a person who can't actually figure out how to use a camera and walk faster than a dead snail at the same time. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. When life gives you vengeful spirits, you use supernaturally possessed cameras to perform exorcisms on them. Grab your camera and get ready to fight the malevolent spirits of the afterlife. It would be absurd of me to not start this segment of video without talking about the box art of this game, because, bruh. The American box art for this game looks so amateurish and is done as a quick Photoshop job, it looks like. It is absolutely astounding how low quality this looks. When you compare it to the other regions, you can clearly see whoever worked on the American division at Tecmo to localize this game deserved nothing but ire and discontent directed at them. This literally looks like something I would do with Photoshop back in middle school. They say don't judge a book by its cover though, and frankly that definitely applies here. While it may have some unimpressive packaging, don't be fooled. Fatal Frame is a game that delivers in the design department. Oh boy does it deliver. Every area of this game oozes with aesthetic that is fitting for the atmosphere it's trying to build. You're in an abandoned old Japanese mansion in the mountains, which may sound cliched at first, but it actually works really well. For many years, horror games were set in smaller settings because of two reasons. The first being trapped in a tiny space with little room to flee helps build fear and tension. The second being that because rendering large open areas on old hardware often resulted in turning your PS2 into a campfire to roast marshmallows on. Resource saving has ironically been very helpful for the survival horror genre, as limitations often require developers to scale back ideas from potentially unmanageable and work within limitations. The fog from the original Silent Hill was actually only created to deal with the PlayStation 1's inability to have a significant draw distance, and it became synonymous with the franchise after that. Fatal Frame benefits similarly in that regard. When the game popped out in 2001, it had been in development for some time, and most weren't familiar with how to really push the PS2 to its limits, so oftentimes developers played it safe in the early days. Fatal Frame uses a lot of low lighting effects and a lot of implications rather than direct visuals, and it's not a bad thing. That's not to say the game doesn't suffer at all from being an early PS1 game, because it does. Character models are very low quality compared to other games of the system, but far from the worst I've seen. Ghosts shine through though, as their designs definitely can catch you off guard and leave you generally creeped out from time to time. Nothing is more terrifying than snapping a picture of a ghost mid-attack sometimes, and that's a good thing. Considering there are not many characters for your player to converse with for most of the game, the ghosts quickly become the star of the show, so it's a good thing the time and effort was focused on them. The Himuro Mansion feels fairly accurate to Japanese homes in the 1800s, and the choices of lighting and camera angles really ramp up the scare factor when exploring it. Fatal Frame is played in third person with fixed camera angles, but the twist being that you can use a first person mode by pulling out your camera, which you can use to fight ghosts. It can also be used as a means to get a better look at your environment. Unfortunately though, the game was definitely designed for a CRT television, and it shows. The texture quality in most areas is very low. To make up for its subpar visuals though, the game utilizes a lot of clever camera tricks, filters, and angles to make things look more appealing. It's not going to bring home any awards in the graphics department, but it's better than looking at Icon, that's for sure. Overall, I think the art direction of Fatal Frame is pretty great for the time period. It certainly would have benefited from a larger budget, but its uniqueness and passion really shine through its flaws. One great thing about the PlayStation 2 is just how many games on it age so well. And this one may not have aged as well as some of the other smash hits on Sony's money printing machine, but it's very playable today, albeit you may want to look into some enhancements to improve your experience. An HD remaster would be amazing for this game, but I imagine that Tecmo is too focused on Dynasty Warriors these days to remember anything outside of it exists. Though we did get ports of Fatal Frame 4 and 5 to modern hardware recently, so maybe there's a glimpse of hope. I'd love to see some kind of proper remake even, but I have even less hope of that than I do of Square Enix finally touching Chrono Trigger to do anything beyond porting it again. Jokes aside, I cannot stress enough that you shouldn't allow the visuals to dissuade you from trying out this amazing piece of survival horror history. Unfortunately, when it comes to mechanics, Fatal Frame sadly has a lot of jank to its formula. The first and most obvious being that the analog sticks are the opposite of what most games do when entering a first-person perspective. This leads to a lot of confusion when trying to dodge attacks from ghosts while simultaneously trying to send them back to the spirit realm. It doesn't help that Miku moves slower than walking speed when you're in photo mode either. That's another point of contention I have. Miku just moves entirely too slow under most circumstances. Going up and down ladders is slower than senior citizens making pudding. You'd think someone being chased by ghosts would move their ass a little bit more, but evidently Miku is only minorly concerned about ghosts. A brave girl or a stupid one? You decide. Movement in general can be a bit confusing at times, as the constant changing camera angles can sometimes make it difficult to orient yourself, and you'll find yourself pulling up the map over and over again to make sure you're going where you think you're going. Not to mention it's common for you to get stuck on something when trying to run. The controls are a bit hard to describe. I want to say it's like tank controls, but it's not completely so. You move in the direction you point the joystick, but you'll keep moving in the direction if you go into another screen. But only if you hold the joystick. If you let go, then you have to now point the actual direction that you want to go. It's a bit confusing at times, and it can lead you to get turned around quite a few times. The workaround is to hold the run button, which is square, and you'll keep running in that direction until you let go, which partially fixes the issue. Except, as I mentioned before, it's pretty common for you to get stuck on things, as it happened to me a handful of times. It's not damning, but it definitely takes some time to get used to if you're more familiar with modern games. though this is less of a criticism of Fatal Frame itself and more of a criticism of games of this time period, as the PlayStation 1 had tons of 3D games that relied on tank controls due to DualShock being introduced later in the console's life, and much of those designs sort of carried over into the early PS2 days. As a result of this, you don't have control of the viewpoint that you're seeing in the game through most of the time. As mentioned before, the game relies heavily on fixed camera angles, but that's not inherently a bad thing. The fixed camera angles can create for unique scares, as I mentioned before in this video, and the game uses them for much grander shots to ramp up the suspense. I would even argue that they're expertly used at times, if not a bit restrictive. Fortunately, you have your trusty camera to help you find your way around, as entering first-person mode can sometimes help you spot what it is that you're not noticing that is mandatory to progress. When it comes to combat, things work well enough. You have a supernatural camera called the camera obscura that you can use to exorcise ghosts.
I captured a ghost with this camera.
You point it, and the longer you hold onto the target, the more damage it'll do. You can also power the bad boy up to make it so that it can take photos from further away, charge up faster, and even increase its maximum charge. On top of this, there are different varieties of film, each with more power than the last. Type 14 being the weakest, and Type 90 being the strongest. Fortunately, you won't run out of film too often if you're conservative, and if you're ever completely out, you can always bring up the Type 14 count back up to 30 at any save point in the game. So you're never completely defenseless unless you just shoot away like an idiot. Enemy encounters can be tense, and often your opponent has the advantage. Most enemies do significant damage to you, and death means returning to a previous save. And going through the tedious process of returning to the title screen and reloading a save file. It's hell. You can heal yourself with herbal medicines and sacred waters, but you're better off trying to hold on to them as long as possible, as the game is incredibly stingy with healing items, and you do not want to get caught at the end of the game with little to no healing, as you may end up just having to restart the game out of frustration. Pro tip, you get a free heal at the end of each chapter of the game, so make smart use of that. On top of healing items, you have stone mirrors, which can save you from death, but you can only carry one of them at a time, and they're even rarer than the healing items of the game. The game actually has a unique system in place that's somewhat like an RPG, though, when it comes to combat. Your natural instinct is to try and avoid combat whenever possible and preserve your resources. But every ghost you exorcise gives you spirit points, which you need to upgrade your camera and use some of its special abilities. You'll eventually get special lenses that give you more special moves that can vastly help with fighting ghosts, but they're limited in use and require spirit stones, a limited resource in the game. Personally, I never found myself using them and focus more on raw power of my camera itself. If you avoid battles, you'll save resources, but your camera won't have as many upgrades later on in the game, so it's kind of a trade-off. Outside of battles, though, you can snap photos of spirits that are not out to kill you, and this can net you some points as well, so it's wise to keep your eyes peeled. The camera obscura can see that which can't normally be seen by the naked eye, and that's turned into a mechanic within game. Many puzzles in the game will have you take a photo of something to show you another location which is the solution to the puzzle. It's a very unique system, if not a little bit obtuse at times. I found plenty of instances where I was scratching my head later in the game, and it's not uncommon to run around the mansion completely stumped, which can be essentially problematic, as if you wander around too much, more ghosts will spawn. This is definitely not the kind of game where you can put it down for a month and come back to it, because you just won't have a clue what you were doing or where you were supposed to be going without dying 100 million times. If you're going to play Fatal Frame, it demands your full attention. While this all sounds very bad, I promise this isn't a Double Dragon 3 scenario. Despite all of its clunkiness, when you actually get into it, the game starts to be fun and exhilarating. There's nothing more exciting than finally overcoming a difficult part and finally being able to progress to see what happens next. Though that's not to say there aren't going to be a few fights where you're going to get stuck on them for a while, and if you're like me, with your natural instinct being in these games to hoard resources, you may find yourself stubbornly refusing using a healing item even when you have them in excess. I don't think I can stress enough that an HD remaster with quality of life enhancements would really do this game justice, as despite its flaws, I can't but feel that just a few minor tweaks would make this gameplay loop more approachable to newcomers. For me, I can persevere and overcome them because I grew up playing old school games, where they throw you into the proverbial meat grinder. That and because I hate myself, evidenced by the games I've forced myself to play on this channel. There is one more complaint I have, and that's all the items in the game look identical on the ground, a shining glint. This is especially annoying because you can't see an item before you pick it up. If you have, say, 90 of the maximum 99 film in your inventory already, and pick up, say, 20 film, you'll only receive 9, and the other 11 don't remain on the ground for you to circle back and pick up later time when you need them more. It's a minor issue, but it did end up making me waste valuable resources from time to time. Fatal Frame is a game that may take you a few tries to get into if you're not into retro games, and if you weren't a fan of the retro Resident Evil games. But if you have the balls,
I've got balls of steel.
It's definitely worth giving a chance and forgiving its jankiness. After all, if we can forgive No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk 2077, and Dragon Ball Evolution, I think we can forgive virtually anything. Don't let all the negativity around the mechanics deter you, as once you get past its flaws and spend a good 2 hours with it, you'll find yourself quite immersed, and the limitations are only minorly frustrating at times. But that frustration is overshadowed by a desire to see what's next. You're overwhelmed with a strong sense of determination to find out what happens next and see what kind of spirits are hiding just around the corner. Summing up the story of this game is going to be a bit tricky, as a lot of it's conveyed through notes and audio tapes you'll find throughout the mansion. Throughout the vast majority of the game, you actually aren't interacting with any other characters, and there's no one for your player character to converse with, though she does seem to have a habit of talking to herself.
Should I take a photo?
Since this is a Japanese game, pretty much every character is Japanese, and I'm potentially going to butcher some of these pronunciations, so I apologize in advance. So what is really happening in spooky schoolgirl taking pictures of Ghost Simulator? The year is 1986. A nuclear meltdown in Ukraine is all over the news, Mexico is hosting the World Cup, and Junsei Takamine, a folklore writer, sets out with his editor and assistant to Himuru Mansion located in the Mutsu region. Junsei and his entourage were hoping to do some research on the mansion for his upcoming novel, as the previous inhabitants mysteriously disappeared. The guy clearly never met my wife, because if she had heard about a spooky haunted mansion in the mountains, she'd smack me in the head with a frying pan if I ever thought about going to it. And rightfully so. 2 weeks pass and Mr. Takamine and his group never return, which causes Mafuyu Hinasaki, a young man that Mr. Takamine had mentored, to head to the mansion to go looking for him. Not the same level as stupid as Mr. Takamine though, Mafuyu actually brings a special camera which was given to him by his mother that has unique properties that he is told can capture ghosts, the camera obscura.
I captured a ghost with this camera.
We actually play as Mafuyu for the prologue of the game and see him witness the power of the camera himself as he exercises a ghost with it. When he tries to leave the mansion through the main entrance, the game begins its first chapter. The game is split into 4 nights, the first of which is called the Strangling Ritual. We're introduced to our player character, 17-year-old Miku Hinasaki, the younger sibling of Mafuyu, who we'll be playing as for the remainder of the game. Miku narrates that her brother and she have always been able to occasionally see that which others could not, implying a high attunement to the supernatural. That's our basic story. We're Miku on a mission to find our lost brother in a haunted mansion. I don't see anything that could possibly go wrong with that, do you? So yeah, we're trapped in a mansion with ghosts, but fortunately for us, Mafuyu dropped the camera obscura when he was running away, and thus Miku picks it up after recognizing it as her mother's camera. She's instantly given a vision of her brother running from a ghost, and when she comes to, she now has the means to defend herself from the spirits around her. Fortunately, Fatal Frame is not a game that forces you to be defenseless for very long. Right away, the first thing you'll notice is that much of the mansion is closed off. Fatal Frame isn't an open world game, instead it's an opening world game, in that the map begins to open up as you progress. Backtracking is definitely on the menu, but as a veteran Resident Evil fan, this isn't a huge deal for me. When Miku enters the fireplace room, she encounters a ghost of a little girl in a white kimono who gestures to a partition screen. When Miku snaps a photo of it, she can see a door behind the screen, and this is where the mechanic of using the camera to solve puzzles is introduced. Arriving at the library, we're given one of the most absolute creepiest cutscenes ever. Almost instantly after this encounter, Miku is attacked by the spirit of the man from the vision, Koji, who is one of the people who had entered the mansion with Mr. Takamine. So it's pretty obvious what happened to him. Most sensible people would turn tail and run, but Miku is still determined to find her brother, so she trudges forward, locating a photograph of Koji with rope marks appearing around his limbs. Throughout the mansion, you can hear whispers from the spirits about some kind of mirror that's needed to break the curse of the mansion. It's not long before you learn the fate of Mr. Takamine, who is now a spirit hell-bent on killing Miku. A quick boss fight and Miku runs to the Narukami shrine in the back of the mansion to retrieve the first piece of the mirror. Upon grabbing it though, she's confronted by the same ghost that chased her brother. Welcome to night number 2, baby. No, Demon Tag is not a game of tag with members of the underworld, as much as that would likely be an interesting game in and of itself. After getting caught by the ghosts at the end of the first night, Miku wakes up the next night after passing out and seeing rope marks appear on her wrists. This is the rope curse, which now has marked Miku, and thus she can't leave the mansion. As time goes on, more rope marks appear on her body until eventually she will die. In other words, she should have just listened to me and left the moment she saw this place looked like something straight out of a horror movie. But maybe horror characters exist in a world where horror movies don't exist, as they lack the common sense to leave spooky situations. Either way, Miku now has no choice but to persevere and find the remaining mirror shards to break the curse. To progress, Miku has to find an old ritual mask called the Blinding Mask, which, as the name implies, impales the eyes of the one is put on. It was used in another ancient ritual and is necessary to open a door at another shrine called the Demon Mouth. There's a lot of puzzle solving at this point of the game, and one of the most annoying boss fights in the entire game, might I add. After trekking through what feels like the whole mansion and fighting off the spirit of the blinded woman from the ritual multiple times, Miku can open the door at the Demon Mouth, only to be confronted by the spirit from before, which we learn is named Kyrie. There is a lot going on here, and if you're looking for a full analysis of the story, you might want to play the game for yourself, as there's just too much to go over in one video. But Kyrie is the spirit of the original Rope Shrine Maiden, and it's clear that the strangling ritual failed, causing her to become a vengeful spirit haunting the mansion, trapping the souls of the lost within. Miku has to go to the site of the strangling ritual to break the curse, and she discovers from some old notebooks left behind that there's a secret path that can take her there. She will, however, need to fight 4 headless priests and the Lord of the Manor, though. Which, again, begs the question why she didn't just turn around and go home straight from the start. There's some flashback bits about Miku's mother who was haunted by spirits and has vaguely hinted that she was descended from the family that lived in this mansion, but she ends up killing herself, possibly from being possessed by an evil spirit, though it's not made 100% clear. When Miku finally reaches the shrine, she surprisingly doesn't find the remains of My Will to Live, but instead the remains of the original Rope Shrine Maiden along with more of the mirror. As before though, Kyrie attacks her, and as always, Miku runs away up a ladder at a snail's pace for some reason. Seriously, I'm pretty confident I can climb ladders faster than this girl. In the end, Miku is saved by the ghost of the girl in the white kimono from the start of the game. So this is where things start to come together. We find out that Kyrie fell in love with a man that looked very similar to Miku's brother Mafuyu, and her love for him felt left her feeling torn internally about fulfilling her duties as the Rope Shrine Maiden. The inner turmoil inside of her caused the ritual to fail and gave birth to the Calamity, which is more or less the evil spirit haunting the mansion and claiming the souls of all those who die here, and the source of the rope curse. This is it though. The final showdown ensues when Miku makes her way down to the bottom of the moon well and finally finds her brother waiting for her at the rope shrine. However, he's absorbed into the evil spirit that Kyrie had become, leaving Miku to fight it off using the camera. As a final boss, this is shockingly less difficult than you'd imagine. Kyrie moves pretty slow, and while she can kill you in one hit, and can only be damaged with a 0 shot, which is more or less a critical hit, she doesn't move around as much as the other ghosts in the game, and I actually managed to take her down on my first try. Once she's exorcised, the camera breaks, and Miku places the mirror onto the shrine, and Kyrie's spirit is cleansed, turning her back to her original self. The white kimono ghost appears once more and tells her that she needs to finish her duty as the Rope Shrine Maiden to keep the demon door closed. Kyrie fulfills her duty, but just as Miku tells her brother to leave with her, he tells her that he can't leave Kyrie alone for all eternity to suffer like this. So he makes the decision to stay by her side, and Miku is forced to leave without him. When Miku wakes up, she sees the spirits that were trapped in the mansion finally set free. It's a bittersweet ending, actually. Now, there is an alternate ending where Mafuyu and Miku escape together, but you have to finish the game on Nightmare difficulty to obtain it, and as far as I know, it's considered non-canon. Overall, the story of the game outshines some of its flaws. It's delivered uniquely and through exploration. Again, there aren't many characters to interact with, and you really do feel a sense of loneliness when exploring, but not in a bad way. The story of Fatal Frame is deep enough to keep you interested, but you may need to pay close attention to realize what's going on. It's a chilling tale of entangling oneself with the spirit realm and dealing with vengeful ghosts. It will certainly give you a few scares too. While Resident Evil focused more on the body horror and scientific, this could happen to you type of scares, Fatal Frame embraces the concept of the unknown and that of the supernatural. It's scary in that you don't know how it would go down in real life, and it works in the game's favor. The fact that your only means of defending yourself is a camera makes it that much more suspenseful. And while the lack of healing items can definitely make the difficulty a bit frustrating at times, it certainly makes one take good care of their resources. It's a good story, better than it's given credit for, that's for sure, and would go down to spawn an entire franchise that now languishes in the shadows of Dynasty Warriors. There's really no way around it when we talk about sound design for this game. The English dub is absolutely dreadful.
My big brother. He was so sweet and kind.
September 9th, 5:40 p.m. The mansion was nowhere to be seen on the map, so we finally had to ask the locals how to find it.
Even my videos, with as crappy as my audio skills are superior to this dub. It is laughable how bad the English audio for this game is, almost like it was made as a joke or an afterthought. This is normally the part of video where I'd splice in audio jokes or fake audio to rip the piss, but there really isn't even a need here. The dub is just that bad, and unfortunately they didn't even release this game in the West with the option to use the original Japanese with subtitles either, so we're stuck with this. I should point out though that there exists an undub mod for the game that removes the English audio in the Western version, if you know how to tinker with these things, that is. We really did get screwed in the West. We got the worst cover art and the worst voice acting in our version of the game. Maybe Tecmo just didn't like the States. If you can ignore the terrible voice acting though, the sound design of the game is excellent, using ambient noise to ramp up the scares and music cues at the right moment to bring the fear to life. While I wouldn't say the music in the game is S tier, it's quite good and gets the job done. It's more about the actual sound effects and the timing that matters here though. Much of the mansion is silent in an eerie way, which makes every instance where you can hear strange noises catch you off guard. The game actually does have quite a large soundtrack, and it's used at the right times to keep the immersion and suspense high. The game is full of drum beats and old and Japanese style music that really sets the atmosphere well. I'd say it's up there in the A tier when it comes to sound design. While you might not find the tracks insanely memorable, you'll be hard pressed to imagine the game without them. Every time we get to this section of the video, I always talk about replay value, and this time I actually had to replay the game to even record it, because I've actually beaten this game once before. When the game is over, you unlock a good handful of stuff. Loading a finished save file gives you access to mission mode, which more or less is a time attack ghost hunting mode where you face off against various enemies in the game to rack up points and rankings. You can also use it as a means to power up your camera some more, as your unlocks and inventory from the previous playthrough carry over to a new game plus. On top of that, you can unlock alternate costumes for Miku, though admittedly they are mostly just recolors of each other, with the exception of the yukatas that even change the in-game flashlight to a paper lantern. If you're bold enough to finish the game on Nightmare difficult, you even get a slightly different ending as I mentioned before, but again, it's not canon. In all honesty though, Fatal Frame gives you what was par of the norm back in 2001 for extra content for finishing a game. There's not much to complain about. You may find yourself playing it again just to pay closer attention to see details that you may have missed. I know that I certainly enjoyed playing a second time for this video. The game is much easier on a New Game Plus run anyways, as you'll have a lot more resources to work with if you're thrifty on your first playthrough. It's a game that started a franchise, and one that I'm glad it came back to for the sake of doing this video, that's for sure. If anything I said in this video turned you off from the game, that's a damn shame because under its flaws, Fatal Frame is a game that should be talked about more when it comes to survival horror. While it hasn't aged as spectacularly as some of the other members of the genre and it hasn't been taken care of as much, it's certainly one that should be part of the conversation. Its DNA was utilized in other Asian horror games, and I'm glad it withstood the test of time and received other entries, even if the last new game in the series was 10 years ago. I can only hope that Tecmo makes the choice to revisit the franchise after all this time when they finally get tired of throwing yet another Dynasty Warriors or Dynasty Warriors spin-off game at us. I remain hopeful that we'll get to pick up the camera obscura again one day and get creeped out by spirits. One can only hope. Until then, though, you'll just have to get your creeps the old-fashioned way, by watching people attempt to flirt with employees at your local GameStop. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. Check out my other videos and let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm WizPlay, and that's enough of that.